In modern cinema today, the idea of a lost scene from a movie is practically unimaginable. Deleted scenes are preserved, especially now in the age of digital media where they're not even taking up physical space. They're preserved, they're shown as extras on home video, bonus features, and they're edited back into inevitable director's cuts. But in the past, when a scene was dropped literally to the cutting room floor, there was a much greater chance of it being truly lost. Those trimmed bits of celluloid were rarely preserved in vaults, and if they were, those vaults were regularly gutted by fires, other accidents, or even the studio itself just clearing out room for more current movies. Most often, the celluloid itself was more valuable than the footage that was on it, and was recycled into its constituent chemicals. When we have lucked out to find lost scenes or even lost movies, it's usually as a complete print in some archive somewhere. In most of those cases, those scenes that were lost weren't lost because of editing, they were lost because of censorship. That's what happened with King Kong. When we lost scenes like Kong stripping the clothing off of Ann Darrow, it wasn't because of editing, it was because of censors, and a complete print was found locked away in some vault somewhere in some Eastern Bloc country or something like that. And speaking of Kong, there are perhaps no more famous or infamous lost scenes in all of Hollywood history than King Kong's lost spider pit sequence. It's been the subject of relentless searching, of studies, of recreations like Peter Jackson's stop motion recreation made in 2005, and myth making, including the myth that it was made at all. Despite claims made by no less than Merian C. Cooper himself, by the widow of Willis O'Brien, by Orville Goldner, who was a studio hand under Willis O'Brien, who worked on King Kong and then literally wrote the book about the making of the movie, it would sadly seem that the spider pit sequence was never actually filmed. Kong scholar Ray Morton has seen the actual shooting schedules, which have every scene in the film and actual lost scenes that are not in the finished film, but none of them showed the spider pit sequence. What seems to have happened is that the spider pit sequence was scripted. It's in the Lovelace novelization for 1932. It was in the scripts. It's in the Gold Key comic, all that sort of stuff. The models were made, test photos were shot, and that's where we see those same two test photos of the spider pit sequence popping up over and over again. Test photos were made, and possibly even some crude test footage, some very crude, very basic stop motion animation, just to see how things might work. And that might be what Goldner is actually remembering. But the finished sequence was cut before it ever actually went to proper filming. Likely because they recognized at the script stage that the scene served no purpose except to slow the movie down. This is an example of the brilliance of the 1933 King Kong for how it manages to keep the pace rolling along. It's a real clinic in how to keep a movie briskly paced, keep it moving along, keep it exciting. The movie is about Kong and Jack and Carl. At this point in the film, where the spider pit sequence would have gone, the story was about Jack and Carl chasing Kong and Anne. We didn't need to see a dozen nameless extras get brutally killed by insects. We didn't know who these sailors were before. We don't need to see them die now. Um, them simply falling from the log and dying served the purpose of getting rid of these extras to show how dangerous Skull Island was, and to get Jack alone so he could go rescue Anne on his own, to show off his own courage and own character. But the myth of the spider pit sequence belies the real lost scene from King Kong that actually was shot and was important, which is King Kong climbing Skull Mountain. Now, we know the scene was shot because it is on the shooting schedules, and there are copious studio stills of it being filmed, not merely a couple test shots that keep popping up over and over again, like the spider pit sequence. There's like a good dozen or more of test shots of photos, of stills of them filming this sequence. It's almost baffling that this scene was removed because it would only have lasted a few seconds, but it adds so much of the context for the film's climax. The scene itself is self-explanatory. Kong reaches the foot of Skull Mountain with Anne in hand. He would have passed by some matted-in footage of waterfalls from the Sierra Nevada mountains, and he begins his climb up the towering stone face, eventually reaching his cave, which is the mouth and the eye sockets of the mountain's eponymous skull. Pretty simple. So why does this scene matter then? Well, a fundamental rule of movies is to show, don't tell. Movies are a visual medium, and as much needs to be shown as possible. This is a weakness of a lot of modern films. A character telling us about something isn't nearly as impactful or even as evident as the movie showing us.
We didn't need dialogue. We had faces.
Don't tell us that a character is a good person. Show them doing good things. Don't tell us that a character is smart. Show them doing smart things. And don't just, surprise us with the fact that Kong likes to climb things. Show us that ahead of time. And that's what went missing with the Skull Mountain sequence. It was setting up the climax. Already the film draws many parallels between Manhattan and Skull Island. They're both islands defined by a towering geography. They both have savage rituals, either at the foot of the wall or on the Broadway stage. One has Anne crucified, the other has Kong crucified. The subway parallels the snake like prehistoric monster, the pterodactyl parallels the biplanes, and Skull Mountain itself parallels the Empire State Building. Even Carl Denham and King Kong parallel each other as the titanic animating forces of their respective islands, and both basically kidnapping Anne Darrow. In the finished film, as nearly perfect as it is, Kong kind of springs his urge to climb the Empire State Building upon us. One would be forgiven for wondering why he would automatically make for it, when it would seem like isolating yourself on a single spire would be sort of a tactically bad idea. You can infer that he sees safety in high places from the existing footage of Skull Mountain. We do know that he does go there to kind of get away from all the dinosaurs and stuff like that, but it would have really driven home this whole idea of he climbs for safety by this few extra seconds of a climbing montage getting him to the safety of his cavern. We would have already seen him do that, and so his climb up the Empire State Building would not have been as surprising to us. But that might also have been why they took the scene out. Other than trying to trim a few extra seconds and keep that movie punching along at a good pace, perhaps Cooper felt that watching Kong climb something twice would have been too redundant. Maybe audiences would have yawned at him climbing the Empire State Building. There he is climbing something again. We already saw a climbing sequence earlier in the movie, rather than being thrilled and awed by it. Nevertheless, if I was going to make an addition to an already perfect film, this would be it. To add back in the scene that sets up Kong's climactic climb up the Empire State Building.